We're live. Okay, here we go. We're going to finish chapter 1 today. Share my screen. So, this is the introduction to human development. This is explaining uh, in what particular domains or what particular aspects are we changing over time, right? So, we're going to be looking at from different perspectives, from different approaches. It could be a biological approach, it could be a cognitive approach, could be a behavioral approach, but we want to know how people change physically, cognitively, and emotionally, socially. So our we all have a level of what we call resilience. Okay, so this is something that as we go through life, we respond to environmental pressures, and each one of us has individual levels of resilience, right? That's the ability to adapt effectively in the face of threats to development. So, what are some things that impact resilience? One would be our individual or personal characteristics, meaning our personality type. Okay, having warm parental relationships, having a strong social support outside the family, and then having available community resources and just opportunities. So when you look at, and please just interrupt me if you have a question or if you have something you want to, whatever, comment on. So when you look at developments, you see like we want you to think of it as like trees. Like here are the three main domains, and you see how they kind of blend into one another because they're impacting one another. So there's no straight shot up as this is the natural order of development that we all become eventually. We have some commonalities, that's true. We're all going up in physical development, we're all going up in cognitive development and emotional social. But we take these little individual branches to make us unique, essentially. So now the early scientific theories, well, there's the evolutionary theory. Charles Darwin uh, suggested that survival of the fittest, natural selection was what led to who we are today over many, many generations and years of adapting to environmental pressures. Then there's the normative approach. And think of normative, whenever you see normative, think of it as short for well, not short, but think of it as normal, right? A norm, when you hear norm, think of it as short for normal. So the normative approach is going to be looking at uh, it, development as a maturational process, uh, age-related averages from large studies of children that represent typical development. What does all that mean? It means they want to know how people change on average. People will hit, say, puberty. Girls on average will hit puberty between 11 and 13. Boys on average will hit puberty between 12 and 14, and things like that. That's a normative approach to understanding human development. Then there's the mental testing movement. Binet and Simon developed the first intelligence test. They call it the IQ test or the intelligence quotient. And what they were doing is they were looking at children who were in orphanages, and some of these children had developmental delays, which used to be called mental retardation or learning disabilities and so on, like severe developmental delay. And so they wanted to test to see what specific needs these struggling children needed. So really, when the first IQ test came out, they weren't even designed for adults. They were designed for children, specifically identifying those who had special needs. Then there's the psychoanalytic. All right, so now this is the mid 20th century theories. Now we've developed a little bit from the normative approach, what is the average, and developed a little bit from the evolutionary, and developed a little bit from the cognitive assessment. Now we're going to the mid 20th century, so we're talking about the mid 1900s, and enter Sigmund Freud and Erik Erikson. They emphasized the individual's unique life history. They emphasized the conflicts that we have between our biological drives, our evolutionary drives and motives, and what is socially expected of us. So Freud said that we have these three parts of our personality. You've been introduced to this in your intro class. He said that that the three parts of your personality are the id, the ego, and the superego. Um, the id is entirely unconscious. We're not aware of it. He said it was the largest portion of our mind, right? That is present at birth. And these are our primitive drives that are the biological needs, right? And desires. Then, so you could think of it as like the evil id, right? That it was just like when you see something you want, your subconscious is like, you want that latte that someone else has. Just take it. That's your id, right? The desire that you have. You see a, a person with a nice butt, you want to grab that, but that's your id. You can't just go around grabbing people's buns, right? So your super ego then is the opposite of that. It's your moral sense, right? It's your conscience, okay? It knows what's right or wrong, right? And this develops between 3 and 6 years of age from interactions with our caregivers, where we're learning about what is appropriate, socially acceptable, right? It says, no, you can't go grabbing butt cheeks. Maybe buy it flowers first. Maybe compliment its hair or something, right? That's the moral thing. And then the ego is your conscious, aware. Your conscience. I know, sorry, but it is confusing. Your conscious awareness. You're aware of what's going on, and you have to decide. You have to balance between the evil devil, the evil id that wants to grab butt cheeks, and then you have the super moral sense, the super ego, like think of with a cape and it's got the big S or whatever, and that's the one that says, no, go rescue, go walk an old person across the street, do something nice. And then there's the ego that has to kind of identify and kind of referee between the two, right? Eric Erickson said that we go through 8 psychosocial crises, multiple for crises, uh, and he called them stages. During our first year of life, we develop a sense of trust or mistrust. Now, this is not you just trust or you don't. It is a spectrum. So, based on uh, our treatment from our caregivers, if they are if they're reliable and if they're loving and attentive and not neglectful or abusive, then we'll develop a sense of trust in the world. In our first year, we begin to associate that if we cry, we're attended to, we're picked up, or we're fed, or we're changed if we're uncomfortable. We can rely on that. We become dependent and we understand. So we trust essentially that things will happen appropriately from others. But if we are neglected or abused for one reason or other, it doesn't mean that the parents are bad. The parents could be going through something bad, right? And so they kind of are focusing on more, immediate things. But anyway, then you'll develop a sense of mistrust. And Eric Erickson said that no matter what age you are, this sense of trust or mistrust or autonomy or industry, it sticks with you for the rest of your life. So if you're taken care of, this is why if you're raising children, you got to really take care of them the first year if you want them to have a sense of trust in the world as adults, in other people. Okay. So then between the ages of 1 and 3, we develop a sense of autonomy, which means we could do things on our own. Or if we don't, we'll feel shameful and doubtful of our abilities. 3 to 6 years, initiative versus guilt. Can you initiate things? Can you actually start things on your own? Not being on your own, but can you do things?
Hmm.
And if you don't, then you'll feel a sense of guilt, and this will last the rest of your life, he said. The 6 to 11, industry versus inferiority. Industry also is, um, they will also call it I want to say competency. It's competency versus inferiority. But basically, between 6 and 11, you start to socially compare to your peers and others of your age, and you start to think, can I compete with my peers, or am I inferior? Am I not as good as my peers in that, or do I feel a sense of inferiority? And he said, this lasts the rest of your life. Again, oh, this is my favorite one: identity versus role confusion. Think about it. This is during adolescence, right? This is during puberty. This is when you're dyeing your hair and you're cutting your hair and you're wearing different style clothes and listening to emo stuff, and you're rebelling, you know. And basically what you're doing is you're trying to identify who you are. You're trying to develop a sense of identity. And if you don't, and you do eventually, we all do eventually. Remember, early adulthood doesn't start until like 25, right? So we have all of these years. A lot of you could be into it right now in this stage. So you have all these years to change and try new things. Am I an athlete? Am I a musician? Am I funny? Am I serious? Am I a lover? Am I a fighter? I don't know,
That
all
was a very scary
am I
time for me.
straight? Am I gay? Am I bi? All sorts of things that we are going through to identify who we are as adults. And it's the most interesting time. It's like you're just trying everything. It's great. Intimacy versus isolation. Now in early adulthood, you're making conscious decisions to, well, do I want to be with someone? Do I want to get married? Do I want a boyfriend? Do I want a girlfriend? Do I want to be alone? Do I want to be alone with cats or dogs? I don't know, right? Generativity versus stagnation. Now you're in middle adulthood. Okay. Generativity. Am I producing things of worth? Am I giving back? Am I helping my fellow neighbors or whatever, my fellow humans? So am I doing something with my life? Or is it stagnate? Am I just kind of going through the motions? And then lastly, late adulthood, integrity versus despair. This is when you look back and you go, am I proud of what I did? Am I proud of what I've achieved? And if not, I'm desperate because there's no time to go back and undo all the things or do the things that I should have done. Any questions about that? Okay. All right. All right. Okay. Behaviorism and the social learning theory. So we talked about Freud and his psychoanalytic theory. We talked about Eric Erikson and his psychosocial theory, the crises, the stages. Now we're going to go to behaviorism and the social learning theory. Um, so when it comes to learning, there are two kinds, basic kinds of learning. I mean, there's another one word, observational, but we'll get there. One is the classical conditioning, and that's where we're making associations between things, right? Certain things, certain smells will make us feel a certain way, or cause us to remember things. Certain smells will make us think of our gam gam, or make us angry if we see something or a song, or we'll associate it with things. That's classical conditioning, where we have a reflexive response. Operant conditioning is based on simple punishment and reinforcement. If we've done something and something good happens as a result, operant conditioning says, well, you'll do it again. If you've been reinforced for it, you'll do it again. If you've been punished for it, if you tell a joke and no one laughs, or they're all sneering at you and jeering and poking, then you won't do it again. You've been punished. It decreased the likelihood of the behavior being repeated. All of this, remind you, all of this is part of human development. Social learning theory, modeling or observation learning. So, meaning, what is that? It means, like, some people call it modeling learning and some call it observational learning. So, for example, a baby claps her hands after a mother does so. A teenager dresses like her friends. So, what we're doing is we're learning by mimicking others. Then there's the cognition. We begin to think like others. Then there's the personal standards. Children develop a sense of self efficacy. Efficacy is a fancy word for effectiveness. Like, am I effective? Okay. So children will develop a sense of self efficacy, a belief that their abilities and characteristics will help them succeed uh, by comparing themselves to others. Any questions? Comment?
Um,
Yeah.
is this why sometimes you see like two friends or like a couple like or two people who have spent a lot of time with each other like act the same or have the same vocabulary
Yep.
or have the same like mannerisms?
Yep. That's exactly why. And then you also, so that was Emily, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good question. Let me ask you this. So Emily is saying, well, when it comes to experiences and exposure and the modeling and the mimicking and the learning and the adapting and the self-concept, is that what kind of helps mold? Yes, that is absolutely what helps mold our thoughts, feelings, and actions. But couldn't it, Emily, also be that people are attracted to people who are similar to themselves?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think so.
yeah. So we kind of like we are already attracted to people who have similar interests. So then what we do then is as our so right? We become interested in different things. Just think of like Netflix shows, right? First you're watching Stranger Things, you binge watch that, you're interested in that genre. Next thing you know, you're watching F is for Family. It's a completely different genre, right? So you do that with your friends as well, right? You might meet and you introduce yourselves and you're like, oh, that's cool. You like the same stuff as me. But we learn to like different things as we go along. So because we're similar in opinion and values and beliefs, perceptions, we'll begin to adopt similar interests as we go. So it's kind of like a feedback. So yeah, good question. All right. So what contributions have has behaviorism and social learning theory made? Behavior modification. What does that mean? Behavior modification is something we would use in a form of therapy to eliminate the behaviors we don't want to see and put in place behaviors we do. Then there's the modeling, observational learning. Again, you would use this for therapy. You would use this for just regular, grade school teaching. Limitations, a narrow view of the environmental influences, saying basically that the only influences are from the people directly in contact with you. No, there are other things outside. And then there's also the underestimation of the individual's active role, meaning what is it about the individual themselves that's unique that allows them to learn and behave certain ways. Piaget came up with his stages of cognitive development. Um, I'm not going to ask you to know this right now, but what I want you to know is that there are four stages: the sensor-motor, the pre-operational, the concrete operational, the formal. Eventually, okay, you're going to know what these really mean, what the challenges are, what the tasks are. What you really need to know is that he thought that these stages of cognitive development, like you from 0 to 2, for example, from birth to 2 years, during sensor motor stage or period, he said, this is what you're limited to. And you can't go outside of that. There's no overlapping of these stages. You can't be partially in sensor motor and pre-operational. You're either in sensor motor or you're in pre-operational. It's you're in it, you're locked in it, and then you go to the next one. And then you go to the concrete. And then you go to the formal, right? But what we found later is that these things are very much overlapping. You could have aspects of sensor motor learning or understanding of life and experiences, but also have aspects of the pre-operational stage as well. So Jean Piaget was onto something in that we do have these kinds of these this somewhat basic order of development, but they weren't so strict. The reason why I kept this slide in, and if you go through your slides that I provide you, you'll see I've deleted some because some are really not important, honestly. I'm not going to teach everything in your textbook. I'm going to teach you what I think is most important. And so the reason why I kept this is because it says developmental cognitive neuroscience and developmental social neuroscience. What does that mean? It means, first of all, let's work backwards. When I get terms, I like to work backwards. So neuroscience, it's neuroscience. It's the study of the brain and the brain's activity. Okay, neurons. That's what are the the cells that make up our nervous system. So we're studying the nervous system, specifically in the brain, cognitive thinking and thoughts, and the development of it. And what they want to know is how do you test the development of someone's nervous system related to thinking? And so what they do is they will measure the brain's activity using fMRIs, using electroencephalographs, using PET scans, whatever forms they need to. But the reason why I kept this is because we can measure an individual's development in different realms, from cognitive domains to social domains to behavioral domains to emotional domains. We can look at how an individual's brain is responding to events on a social, cognitive, emotional, or behavioral uh, level. We can measure the brain's activity. That's why I kept this. It's because I want you to know, like, when we talk about behavioral neuroscience, then you're going to know, okay, neuroscience, the study of the brain's activity related to behavior. Oh, okay, got it. Questions? No? Am I going too fast? I know I have a habit of going too fast. I'm not hearing anything. Okay, so I can, right as I instruct, you'll see in the recording, I can only see 3 people at a time, and I have Ian, iPhone in a green hoodie, and Emily, but Emily's screen is black. So now I'm on to Patrick and Maddie. Now I'm on to black screens, nothing, 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 and nothing. So I'm gonna go up to Patrick and Maddie. Oh, there's Sage. Hi, Sage. I like the color of your wall. Patrick and Maddie, am I going too fast? Is it making sense? Do you need any clarification about anything? No?
No, you're good so far.
Good so far? Okay. Please let me know if there's anything you want to like go more in depth on, or give me an example. Like 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 Emily has done. Just chime in, okay? All right, all right. Go back up there. Okay. Ethology. Okay, what is ethology? This is a study or a science that's concerned with the adaptive or survival value of behavior and its evolutionary history. Of course, it's going to be rooted in the work of Darwin. Imprinting. Does anybody know what imprinting is? Has anyone heard of that? I bet you some of you have. Go ahead, Ian.
It's when the baby it's like when the baby first opens his eyes and they see their mother, or like if they see, it's the first
Right.
thing they see
Right. There you go. Right.
and they think that it's mother
That's right.
or
They
father.
bond to it. They form an attachment to
Yeah.
it. Right.
Ducks do that, don't they?
Huh?
Yeah, they
Duck-
do.
Ducks do that, right? When
Yep.
they first hatch and the first thing they see, they attach themselves to them.
Yep. A lot of birds do that. Yep. And do you know
Just
why
make
that
sure you
is?
don't stand in front of a bunch of baby duck eggs.
Do you know why imprinting
Otherwise,
happens? Do you know why specifically birds will imprint? Not even all birds. Why some birds? This is the
I
genius
think it might be.
evolution.
I think it might be because it's their instinct.
Okay, it is absolutely instinctual.
Is it because they come from an egg and not from a womb, so they don't have that level of attachment already built in?
They're not going to survive otherwise, right?
Okay. Let's go with Patrick first. And so Patrick is saying, well, to compensate for not developing in the womb, where you can experience more of the bodily goings on within the mother, you have to compensate to form an attachment in a different way. I like that. Um, that's good. It doesn't address why other birds don't, though. So,
Mm.
but it's very good, though, Patrick. It's very good. And someone just said because they won't survive if they don't. Okay. Well, who said that?
That was me. It has to do with predators, right?
Who? That was me. I don't. Is it Emily
Annalise.
again? Annalise?
Yeah.
I can only see 3 people at a time. Okay. So, Annalise, yes, that is also true. Patrick is right, and you're right. It's absolutely true. Let me ask you a question, Annalise, though. So let's say you have a baby, a nest of eggs, robin eggs, Do they imprint?
Would they?
Would they?
Uh,
How do you know when something's imprinted?
well, it depends on their environment, right?
Their environment? Kind of.
They follow you?
Right.
So if they're in the nest, they don't need to
Right.
follow you, right?
That's right. So there's no imprinting with the robin, a fledgling robin.
What if the baby robin is like by itself on the ground?
Then it's dead. I mean, it's gonna die.
I gotta tell you this. I think one time a duck did imprint on me.
Okay. Story time.
Because
get
I
it.
guys were following me.
Hold on. Let's stay on track with this one though. Hold on. Hold on. That's very interesting though, Ian.
Yeah.
So okay. So here's a robin in a baby robin, a fledgling robin in a nest that does not imprint, stays put in the nest. Then there's a duck or a goose or a chicken that does. What's the difference?
Oh, one flies? Does that have anything to do with it?
Geese and ducks fly.
But don't they like lay their eggs like they lay their eggs on the ground versus the other birds
Right.
lay in the nest?
Who said that? That's good. Who said that?
Alicia?
Alicia. Okay. Now, why would a bird lay their eggs on the ground versus in a tree or above off the ground?
So are we?
Do the parents expect the baby to start fending for itself sooner?
Yeah, like, does it have anything to
Because
do
like being in a nest, you're going to be taken care of.
Oh,
Uh-huh.
That evolution, so it has to do.
actually,
Whereas like a duck is going to expect the child to follow, do what it does, learn
Yes.
its behaviors and start
Yes.
feeding
Yeah.
itself.
So,
learn by
yes.
imitation versus being like hand fed, so to speak.
Yes. Yes. Now I'm going to give you guys something. This is called being a member of the precocial. You've heard that very quite precocious, supercalifragilistic. Precocious means advanced. Altricial is the other kind. So when newborns are, newborn, they come out as a species that is either precocial or altricial. And the precocial species are the ones that are required to develop imprinting, because if they didn't, they would walk off and then they would just die. So it was evolutionarily adaptive for them, these species, to imprint onto the caregiver immediately. So it followed it away from harm. Whereas an altricial species that is constantly fed and taken care of and protected, that's stationary, these don't imprint. Now, what are humans? Are humans precocial or altricial?
Or Homo sapiens?
But are we precocial or altricial?
Altricial?
Altricial.
Special.
We do not get up and walk around. Are horses precocial or altricial?
Precocial?
Very good.
Social.
Very good. So, what did we learn? Not just the difference between precocial and altricial. We learned evolution is a natural selection is a smart monkey, that it ensures that when you have abilities that you're taken care of in order to survive, that you'll develop different skills, different instincts. Do humans have instincts?
Yes.
Tell me.
Fear.
No, that is not an instinct.
Like latching on, things like that, like breastfeeding.
Those are reflexes. Good example.
Okay.
Though.
All right.
Good example, though.
Emotions.
No,
What about your fight or flight response? Like
that is a
when you
reflex.
That's okay.
Yep. The answer is yes. We have one and only one instinct. One. human.
Reproduction.
That is not considered an instinct. That's a very good guess, by the way.
Loyalty?
It is considered a motive.
Wait,
Or
what'd she say?
reproduction is what I heard.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh, I said loyalty. But
Loyalty is not an instinct. An instinct is defined as a set of behaviors.
So a routine.
Routine is not an instinct. There's a specific one.
Is it like the peekaboo reaction where they're
That's a reflex.
okay?
We have one instinct and one instinct only, and that is the maternal instinct.
Oh.
It's the only one humans have.
So do men have men don't have a maternal instinct, so.
They do. They do.
Oh, they do?
They
Okay.
do. It's just it's very different. We call it the maternal instinct. It should be we should call it a parental instinct, but the maternal one specifically, the female one, is so much stronger. It will, like, it just happens instinctually. Anyway, okay, that's good. That's good. That's critical thinking, people. Good job. This makes me excited for this class.
I have a quick question.
Yes, please.
I don't know if it goes off topic, but like, so if we have like a maternal instinct, what happens like with like animals or humans who like neglect their babies? Is that something like that's like? I know there's like some sort of is that psychological? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is that something
So-
broken?
Yes. The answer is it could be. The answer could be that it could be something else. Sometimes people will neglect their offspring because they are a common reason is the mother's depressed.
Oh, okay.
And she may have that maternal instinct just dying to come out, but she psychologically is not there. Sometimes people will neglect their children because they are dealing with bad things, like mom and dad lost their job, the house burned down, they're homeless, they're hungry, and so they're just trying to get the basic, just keep the kid warm, keep it fed. I got to go back to work, you know.
I see.
So it's not like it's not there, but sometimes there are extenuating circumstances that lead to the maternal instinct to take a back seat.
So
But the- Go ahead.
could that be true for animals too? Who neglect their offspring? Or is that a little more
Okay.
complicated?
Okay. First, we are animals. So you're saying, could it be true with non-human animals?
Yeah.
Yes, but for different reasons.
Well,
Because they don't have jobs. They
yeah.
don't have homes, right?
Yeah.
So we have a level of intellectual ability that non-human animals do not have. But yes, it does happen. Or Alicia, to your point, and this was your original point, I think, your original question, could there really be just something wrong with somebody that they don't develop or have a maternal instinct? And the answer is absolutely yes.
Okay.
Okay, very good. Any other questions?
Is that the same for a man as well?
Yes. Of course.
Really?
Of course.
So they could still have all those issues for a man even though they didn't give birth to their child or anything, and they still decide to neglect it?
Yeah, I guess you could say it could be a conscious decision to neglect it. But they probably aren't thinking of it in terms of neglect. They're probably thinking of it in terms of I don't care.
Even if they have more than one?
Even if they have more than one child.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some people are not meant to be parents. Just because you got a peeper or you got a peep doesn't mean you should be making kids. I know that our purpose in life is to make more of us or help those that are. And I understand that, but then just help those who are, because you're not you. I mean, but some people are just not fit to be parents. And that's good. That's actually a good thing, believe it or not. That's actually a good thing. In order for us to survive, there has to be variability. There has to be variation. And part of having variation means you have things that are not so good. My kid, I gotta, hold on a second. My son plugged in his switch into the TV and it blocked the clock. So I gotta block the clock. So I want to make sure. Okay, so it's 9:13. You guys ready to go on? All right. I'll just take that as a yes. Critical period. The critical period, we call the critical period a point in time in your life where you must be exposed to something in order to develop a skill. The sensitive period is where you are most sensitive to developing a skill. Like you have like heightened sensitivity to stimulation that enhances your abilities. Critical stages or periods are where you must be exposed to something in order to develop that skill. Here's an example. Well, then you want to try to, want me to just can't tell you the examples? Let's just do that. All right. Unless someone wants to guess. What do you think is a skill that you have that you were most sensitive to developing it?
A skill?
Yeah,
Can you
Like speech
that's
from
the
like
answer. That's the
birth to one
answer.
or two.
Yes, Patrick. So when we are, yes, Patrick, when we are about 3, 4, we're in a stage called fast mapping, where we are just sponges to language. And we develop language wicked fast. And that's our sensitive period to language development. A critical period, we don't have many critical periods, but I'll just give you an example. Sight. If we are not exposed to light of any kind for like the first few years of life, we will not develop vision. Okay. So sensitive period, an optimal time for certain capacities to emerge. The individual is especially responsive to environmental influences. The boundaries are less well defined than those of the critical period. Okay, whatever. You get the idea. The evolutionary developmental psychology seeks to understand adaptive value of species-wide competencies. They study cognitive, emotional, and social competencies as they change with age, and they aim to understand the person-environment system. There's really nothing to add to that. I feel like this is whatever. Lev Vygotsky and his social cultural theory. It's simple. It's very simple. He said that we learn abilities based on what he called scaffolding. And what it is as children, we are exposed to challenges from our caregivers or our teachers, and then they work with us to master it. And then they raise the bar and they say, okay, now jump over this and practice and practice. Okay, do it this way and practice. Jump off of this foot in such a way. Good. Now arch your good. Arch your back. Good. And kick up and good. You cleared the bar. Then they raise it again. Okay. And that's how he said we develop cognitively, culturally, socially, right? How culture, values, beliefs, customs, and skills are transmitted to the next generation through social interaction, especially cooperative dialogues with more knowledgeable members of society. He said it was necessary for children to acquire culture. So Lev Vygotsky, what you should know is that we develop by these scaffolds, these um, you, a scaffold, on the side of a building that they're constructing to build the building up, and they just keep building up on top, putting a new scaffolding on the top of the next one, and then on the next one, and then eventually the building will be as tall as it needs to be. The ecological systems theory, where the person develops within a complex system of relationships that are affected by multiple levels of the surrounding environment. The layers of the environment include the microsystem, the mesosystem, the exosystem, the macrosystem. Not going to ask you to know that. It's rare that I'll ask you to know the specific details. It's the concepts that I want you to understand. So look at this little illustration here, right? So here's the individual in their microsystem, the little baby. In the microsystem, it's the baby's clothes, it's the grass, it's the toys that it's playing with in its own immediate space, its own personal experiences. Then you have the mesosystem, and that's the things just surrounding it: the immediate family, the child care center, the neighborhood play area. Then you have the exosystem. Now you're outside of that. You have friends and neighbors, the workplace, community health services, extended family, and then the macrosystem, your country, the world, and so on and so forth. Okay, so what does this mean? It means that the individual baby is going to be influenced in some way from its immediate environment. Oh, look at that blade of grass. Oh, look at that dandelion. This is my microsystem. I'm gonna see it taste. Well, that's bitter, right? I'm working with my microsystem. Then just outside of that, over there, that's my mom right there. She's just watching me, right? Oh, look, I'm playing with a friend. You're not in my mind. You're not in my body, so it's not my microsystem. You're outside of me. So I like this. What are you doing here? That's my friend, my mesosystem. Then outside of that, and then outside of that. That's the concept. All these things are influencing, whether they're aware of it or not. Does that make sense? Now on to scientific research. A lot of this should be, in fact, all of this, I believe, should be, except for the very last part, all of this should be review. Does that mean you memorized it, you know it all perfectly? No, but it means you've been exposed to it because you took Psych 101. So systematic observation. Okay, we're talking about research methods. How do we answer questions? That's what the goal is. Let's answer a question. We could observe something in its natural environment, where we record the behavior in the field or natural environment, but not all individuals have the same opportunity to display behavior. What does that mean? It means some things you can't observe in their natural environment. Let's say you want to study sex. Well, you can't just like, peep into someone's window and go, okay, oh, that's how that works. Oh, very good. Yes, I see. Oh, and then they're gonna, yep, that looks like it hurt. Okay. You can't do that. That's unethical, right? It's private. Also, some things rarely happen. Like, let's say you wanted to study, what's something that, say you wanted to study, you got this one kid who's got a problem or something, and you want to study his or her environment, and you're concerned about bullying. Well, maybe bullying only happened twice in the child's life. And so you can't just walk around observing the kid's environment while they're not aware of it or anything and be like, man, when's this bullying going to happen? Right? Sometimes it just happens. It just rarely happens. So what we'll do then is we'll try to use observation, but make it more structured. Make the bullying happen. We don't do that, obviously, but make the sex, I don't know, make it happen, right? So it's also known as a laboratory observation, where the situation is set up to evoke the behavior, right? So in one example is they wanted to know, does the presence of a firearm increase the likelihood of aggressing or aggression? And so, to drive around and look for people who have a shotgun hanging in the back window of their truck, or a gun in their glove box or something, who are, to drive around just hoping a random person will aggress who has a gun, it would take forever. But you can set up a controlled condition. And what they did is, this is what they actually did. They had these people play a game, and it was a like a competitive game. And in the room they hung a badminton racket, just like a badminton, with a little birdie thing, and they measured the number of aggressive moves that they made in playing the game. And then they had other people come in and play the same game, but they took the badminton racket down and hung a rifle. And just by having the rifle present, just by having it there, they didn't acknowledge it. They didn't say, hey, by the way, there's a rifle over there. They just had it hanging up on the wall. They made significantly more aggressive moves just by having the rifle. So it's a form of observational research, but it's slightly controlled. It's contrived. Self-report data. We can conduct clinical interviews. Clinical interviews are open. They're flexible conversations. Right? So we could be talking about your day, and then you might say something about how your boss was a jerk. Oh, okay. Let's talk about your boss. It's unstructured. That's another way of calling it. It's an unstructured interview. Let the person who's talking, um, let the subject guide you, direct you, and see if you can draw inferences from what they're focusing on. Versus a structured interview, we have a set list, a set, a predetermined set of questions that everyone's asked the same question in the exact same way. And the good thing, because it's structured, you can compare the responses between individuals. An unstructured one, you cannot. They're very unique, very individual. But you'll get a large amount of information for unstructured. The structured is not as in depth, but it's you could say it's more valid. A case study, someone's unique. So there's something about that individual. Let's say Charles Manson. Okay, many case studies were conducted of Charles Manson. There was something unique, or another. Not that he was a serial killer himself, but he led people to do whatever. But let's say they were looking at I don't know, what's his name? Something Ramirez, the serial killer.
Victor Ramirez.
What is it?
Victor Ramirez.
What is it?
Victor.
I thought it was Richard.
Richard. Richard. Yeah, but hey, you led us there, Maddie. You set the tracks up, and they just drove the steamroller. So yeah, Richard Ramirez. What led that individual? So you conduct a case study. Tell us about your youth. Tell us about your experiences, your relationships, right? A case study, in-depth and detailed accounts of one individual. One individual. That's a case study. An ethnography. Here you're interested in a particular setting, a social setting, a group. So what a researcher will do is they'll go into the group and they'll kind of mix in the fold. They'll become a member, see it from the inside, right? It says participant observation of a culture or a distinct social group. There's a mixture of observations, self-reports, interpretation by the investigator. Okay, so you are in the mix. They did this with, and I know, and I understand. Like you might, if you don't know me, you might think that I'm perverted because I'm always using sex-related examples. But because of human sexuality, I just have a lot of like research. They did this study with prostitution. They had women join a prostitution ring. They didn't actually do the prostitution part, but they pretended to be prostitutes just to see what their lives were like. They befriended them, and they saw that these women who were prostitutes, they weren't actually victims of society. They discovered, they concluded, they weighed the costs and the benefits of prostitution, and they said, no, this is my lifestyle, this is my life choice, I'm totally fine with it. But that was an ethnography. They did the same thing with the that one comet, Hellbop, I think, I can't remember, where people thought there was a spaceship behind the tail of the comet, and then they were supposed to be taken aboard it. So they all committed mass suicide, and their spirits were supposed to rise behind, rise up to this tail that the spaceship was following behind the tail in the tail of the comet, and they're supposed to be sucked up into it. Um, and the odd thing is that they bought all these telescopes, these fancy, expensive telescopes. These are doctors, lawyers, really rich people. They bought these fancy telescopes, and they didn't see the ship, and they looked for it. They looked for this ship to prove their point. The people that ended up killing themselves, they didn't see the ship, but they still killed themselves. Let's see. Sorry. Cultural. There are cultural influences on our development. Looking at immigrant youth. Oh, so why did I think of that? Because there were actually people there who joined the cult, and they just didn't kill themselves. They just observed everybody else doing it. Weird, right? You think they would stop them, but I guess I don't know. Something happened. Immigrant youth adapting to a new land. Many immigrants adapt surprisingly well. They're likely to commit delinquent and violent acts. They use drugs and alcohol. Yeah, I'm sorry. Less likely to use drugs and alcohol, less likely to have sex early, less likely to miss school because of illness, and they're less likely to suffer from obesity. Although after 10 years, they start to catch up. That's legit. They report just as favorable and at times even higher self-esteem as do young people from native-born parents. These are influenced by strong allegiance to their family and their community, because they'll have like Little Italy, Chinatown, that kind of thing. So they'll just kind of hang out with their own fellow immigrants. The tensions between family values and the new culture do occur, though, right? So the father or the mother be like, "Oh, you can't go out and be out till 8 o'clock," and the kid's like, "Well, everybody's out till like 11. I just want to be out till 8." No, that's not how we do it. Okay. Correlational research. Again, this is review. Correlation, looking for a relationship between two variables like um, temperature and homicide rates. As temperature rises, homicide rates increase. It's not the temperature, the heat is causing people to kill other people, right? I told you, some of you, the story. It's not like you're down in southern Florida and you look at the thermometer and it goes from, 101 to 102, and you're like, that's it. You throw your sweet tea and you go kill somebody. That doesn't work like that. It's because what happens, there are all these variables in the middle that contribute to homicide, right? So with heat comes discomfort. With heat comes the pooling of people around cooler places like the beaches and the pools and the air conditioning. So when you get people just simply mixing more, it just increases the odds that someone's going to be offended by somebody. So, of course, with correlational research, we cannot establish a cause effect relationship. Strong correlations are closer to 1, whether it's positive 1 or negative 1. We'll cover research again. Okay, experimental research. What do you need to know, right? The basics, the independent variable, the thing that you're freaking with, the dependent variable, the thing that you're measuring to see what the outcome was, right? The experimental group, the ones who are exposed to the independent variable, the control group, the ones who are not. They're the comparison group, right? So the independent variable is manipulated by the investigator. It's expected to cause changes in another variable. In this case, it'd be the dependent variables. We call it the dependent variable because it depends on the independent variable. The dependent variable's outcome depends on the independent variable. Like your children are dependents. You claim as dependents in your taxes. They depend on you. The dependent variable is measured, not manipulated, right? So if you want to know what the relationship, no. If you want to know if, oh gosh, I don't know. There's a million things I could think of. If drinking coffee has an impact on emotional stability, I don't know, right? So you give one group caffeinated coffee, other group decaffeinated coffee, and then you have them take an emotional stability test. There it is. The emotional stability results depends on whether that they had caffeine or not. So if it depends on that, that means the emotional stability is the dependent variable, and then the caffeine is the independent variable. There it is. Field experiment conducted in a natural setting. They do the experiment in the individual's natural setting. I don't care about it. Okay. This is an important one. So if we wanted to know how people mature, or develop cognitively, we'll say, which means intellectually in their thinking, thoughts, problem solving, all that. We could do a number of things. We could get a bunch of like newborns and just test them, their IQ, uh, let's say every 3 years, and we do that until they're 30 years old. It takes a long time. It's the same individuals over a long period of time. It's a longitudinal study. Done. Okay. Then you have what's called a cross-sectional. Here, what you do is you take different individuals at different age ranges, give them IQ tests all at the same time. So you're going to measure a group of 1-year-olds, and a group of 3-year-olds, a group of 5-year-olds, all at the same time. And you compare them that way to see how people develop cognitively. The sequential cohort is what it's really called. Not just, you can just call it sequential, is where you do the combo platter number 4. And the combo platter number 4 is where you're doing a cross-sectional design, but you're doing it over a long period of time. What does that mean? It means you have a group of 1-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 5-year-olds, 7-year-olds, 9-year-olds, 11-year-olds, let's say. You're taking all of their IQ tests, and then 2 years later, you do it again. Then 2 years later, you do it again. So the 1-year-olds are now 3. Now the 3-year-olds that were 1 are now 5. And you do it every 2 years. So you're just combining a cross-sectional and a longitudinal. You're doing a cross-sectional design, but you're doing it over a long period of time of the same individual. So it's still longitudinal. That's what a sequential one is. So all of these are ways to measure change in individuals. That's the goal. That's the idea of this. If I asked you a question in an exam or a quiz, it will not be on sequential. Focus on the longitudinal or the cross-sectional. Longitudinal should be the easiest one to remember. So I'll probably ask you that. I don't like to ask trick questions. So I'll probably say, all right, so which one is where you measure the same group of people over a long period of time? Longitudinal. There it is. All right, so what are the rights of research participants? Right? You can't harm them, right? You can't go around, if you want to find out how long it takes a person to bleed out, you can't just go up to somebody random and say, hey, you want to be a part of a study? Yeah, you do? Great. Right in the gut and see how long it takes. You can't harm them. You have to provide informed consent. Or I'm sorry, you have to get informed consent. Or you can't just go, hey, you want to be a part of a study? Yeah, sure. Stab them. You have to say, you want to be part of a study? Yeah, sure, but wait, I got to tell you what we're doing. We'll stab you to death. No, I don't want to be part of that. All right, well, then never mind. Find somebody who does. You cannot name them. You cannot identify them in your research. It's participant A, participant 3479. They have to be knowledgeable of the results. They have to be debriefed. You have to tell them what you did, why you did it, how you conducted it, and what the purpose of it was. I don't know what beneficial treatments are. Rights of research participants, beneficial treatments. I don't know. Pay, I don't know. Whatever, ignore that. Ta-da! We did it. All right, I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to stop recording. Quiz at 4 p.m. Closes at midnight. And